if you were to create a religion for yourself, I mean, religion's maybe not the right word, because religion would imply cast iron rules for the large part that have been imposed, maybe half-heartedly accepted, but at some level imposed, and we know why that has to be in order to maintain social networks, etc., etc. But if you were to create your own peculiar psycho-spiritual, creative entity, and let's say you were to call it poetry koan, and this would, whatever practices you maybe imported from various other psycho-spiritual creative domains, these would be carried out ritualistically on a daily basis. And maybe one of these would be to offer up two pieces of language to the gods. And where better to offer up those two pieces of language, you could say, on this virtual metaphysical space called YouTube. I mean, think about it. I mean, we know it's all built into this capitalist structure and engine, but apart from that, YouTube is, as the name would suggest, a tube in which one you communicates to another you, and that you could be God, that you can be you, that you can be, as it was last year, two family members who I would have in mind every morning when I would wake up and take a poem and just sort of have a cup of tea and have a chat with these family members who I would have in mind. They weren't there, but I would have them in mind. One of them would be my mother, and one would be my sister Madeline, who I also knew, her being sort of 5 hours ahead, that she would maybe quite often listen to my witterings on an almost every morning basis. And it was a period of time where I felt accompanied, and I felt I don't know, I felt I was doing God's work, for want of a better word. So the idea struck me today that maybe I would reconstitute that ritual, which is why I'm out here today selecting a poem. In fact, I'm going to do, I think, two. I'm going to put these beside or under my pillow this evening, the Tenor of Your Yes and My Happiness, and I'm going to let the dreamer dream all night on Mary Ruefle's two selected poems. Selected, first of all, by Mary Ruefle herself, and I'm sure she must have put those two at some level together, right? And then selected by me for Monday morning Pessoa, tomorrow, who I'm going to suggest takes these poems and goes for a walk with them, with Max, maybe even comes back here and does some good morning free associating, some talking to his loved ones, and talking to the you of YouTube at some point, sort of downloading that into the you of YouTube, in the hope that language offering might be well received. If you were lonely and you saw the earth, you'd think, Here is the end of loneliness, and I have reached it by myself. If you were sad and you saw the kitchen, you'd think, here is the end of sadness, and they have prepared it for me. Turner painted his own sea monsters, but hired someone else to do small animals. Apparently, he could do a great sky, but not rabbits. Much like God at the end. Okay, first poem that Steve sent us from yesterday. The Tenor of Your Yes. If you were lonely and you saw the earth, you'd think, here is the end of loneliness and I have reached it by myself. I guess in some way this captures something of the hubris of the human creature, in that through psychotherapy, through other ideologies, we have been led to believe that we should be able to give ourselves everything that we need in order to feel whole, to feel complete. I guess it's wrapped up in that psychotherapeutic idea that we should love ourselves and be our greatest allies in some way. If you were sad and you saw the kitchen, you'd think, here is the end of sadness, and they have prepared it for me. Although unfortunately, this is actually the beginning of sadness, which was prepared for me last night by Steve making soup. Thank you, Steve. Maybe because we're such a hypersocial species, we are in some way always waiting for another, for God, for whoever to feed us. I think there's also something going on here about progress. This idea that God started simple, sort of sketching in the light and dark, and then the sea and the earth, and then finally, we start to see the plants and the trees and all of that, and eventually we get to us, which is often taken to be the ne plus ultra of godly creativity, you could say. The absolute apotheosis of complexity and refinement, when the last line would suggest that maybe we were the rabbits that either were completed by someone else, and maybe a more mischievous creature, or that God had a go, but kind of botched the job in the process. I'm looking for a culvert. I don't know if you've seen one. I've heard there is one near here. Ebury Way, perhaps. So we circle back to the beginning of the poem, to the title, The Tenor of Your Yes. A yes, of course, can be given in many ways. It can be a wholehearted, jolly yes, and it can be a somewhat mealy-mouthed and reticent yes. I think we're closer to that yes in a Mary Ruefle poem. Her name itself, Ruefle, would suggest that her yes is never a hell yes, but neither is it a hell no.
My friend.